A man convicted of involuntary manslaughter returns to his ex-wife, who decides to give him a second chance. But her mother is categorically against it because he wants to live in an apartment that also belongs to her. In the courtroom, love, guilt, and the harsh law collide. Does a man with a dark past have the right to return to a home that no longer exists for him? Chapter 1. Returning to a home that no longer exists. Seattle, Washington. The rain fell, as usual, as a reminder that the city remembers each of its pains. Alex Johnson stood under the gray arch of an old three-story building on Maple Street, his fingers clenched on the metal handle of his suitcase. Everything looked familiar: the cracked stairs, the faded sign near the door, the creak of an old elevator somewhere in the background. But home no longer felt like home. 3 years have passed since he last crossed that threshold. 3 years marked by every day of the prison schedule, every minute of remorse. And now, free again, he had only one goal: to return Natalie. They weathered the storm. They persevered. And now, as before, she was waiting for him. At least that's what he believed. Natalie opened the door almost immediately, as if she had been standing behind it all this time. Her eyes are tired, but not empty. Her hair is gathered in a sloppy knot. She has a kitchen towel in her hands. She was silent for a few seconds, as if reading his new face, comparing it to the old one. Then she simply said, "Come in." Inside, almost everything was old-fashioned. Their books on the shelves, paintings they once picked up at a flea market in Portland. But something new was added: silence. The one that screamed. "Mom at home?" he asked, glancing down the corridor. "No, but she will be back soon." Natalie paused. "And Alex, it's not all that simple." He nodded. "Of course, it's not easy." The mother-in-law, Elena Woods, was an unforgiving woman. In her world, a mistake is a brand that doesn't wash away even over the years. "I did not come here to live without consent. I just want to see if there's anything else for us." Natalie sat opposite, her hands clasped between her knees. She looked at him with a mixture of tenderness and fear. "Yes, but not in this apartment." Those words fell harder than the prison doors once did, because behind them is a new battle: court, for the right to be with the woman he loved even in his darkest days. But this is only the beginning. And it was this morning that Alex Johnson decided if he had to fight for the house, he would fight, even if this house no longer belongs to him. Chapter 2. Facing the Past. The King County courtroom wasn't just cold because of the air conditioning. It breathed formality, the polished language of protocols, wooden chairs that creaked with every movement, and the echo of someone's fateful words spoken here once before. Alex sat in the front row, his back to the empty hall. The judge had not yet appeared, but the atmosphere was already chest-tight. He came earlier not out of impatience, but out of fear of being late for his own future. He had not seen Elena since the day of the verdict. Then her gaze pierced him as if words were superfluous. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood, looked, and memorized his face so that later she could hate him more precisely. When the door opened, Alex barely moved. Natalie walked in first, holding her mother's hand. Elena was wearing a dark blue suit, her gray hair tied in a tight bun. She saw him and didn't blink. "I just looked." He nodded, but there was no answer. "Judge Kelly Raines," said the clerk's voice, and everyone stood up. Kelly Raines is a woman in her 50s, with a clear gaze and a steady demeanor. She had a reputation as someone who listens but doesn't feel sorry. This did not scare Alex. He came not to ask for pity. "In Johnson v. Woods," she began, "I asked the parties to introduce themselves." Alex's lawyer, a young black lawyer, Justin Morneau, voiced their side. Woods introduced herself. Her voice sounded clear, without trembling. "I have a right to know who lives in my house," she said, "and I will not allow a person who killed another to live under the same roof with my family." Natalie shuddered slightly. Alex looked at her, but she didn't meet his gaze. "Miss Woods," interjected the judge, "in this hearing, we do not consider the question of guilt, which has already been decided. We are considering the right of residence." "Continue." Elena nodded, clutching the folder's handle. Her hands were shaking. He said it was an accident. But is it possible to accidentally take the life of a person who trusted you? The graduate student, Claire Morris, was just a girl, and now she is gone, and he just wants to return as if nothing happened. Alex clenched his jaw. He could not change the past. But Eleanor's every word brought him back there to the night where it all ended, or it started. Chapter 3. A Mother's Heart Against the Law. Eleanor Woods was cool, almost flawless. But those who had seen enough lives destroyed by pain could read in her eyes that it was not an insult, it was a defense, protecting not yourself, but your daughter, granddaughter, home, and for this she was ready to go to the end. I have nothing against Natalie building her life, she told Judge Kelly Raines, but I have a right to be heard when it comes to the safety of my home. The judge nodded, marking the case. Mrs. Woods, she said calmly, your daughter has agreed to marry Mr. Johnson for the second time. This is her legal right. However, I ask you to focus on the issue of occupancy. You are a co-owner of the apartment. It all boils down to whether your son-in-law has the right to live in a shared apartment without your consent. Eleanor straightened up in her chair. I cannot allow my granddaughter to grow up next to a person who did not control himself to the extent that it cost the life of a young woman. I don't care how a court classifies it as accident or negligence. In my mind, this is a loss that no one has yet truly paid for. I paid, said Alex, standing up. His voice was quiet, but every word was a stone. I lost everything. Your work, reputation, freedom, and now every day I try to prove that I can be different. Not better for myself, but for Natalie, for her daughter. The judge raised her hand, stopping him. Alex sat down. Let's leave the emotions for later, Kelly said. Facts, Miss Woods. Eleanor nodded, her lips pursed. I have no problem if Natalie decides to live with him, but not in my house. This apartment is my inheritance from my husband. She was his pride, and I will not allow it to become the stage for a second tragedy. Johnson's attorney, Justin Morneau, looked over the notes and rose cautiously. Do I understand correctly that your objection is not based on legal, but on moral grounds? Eleanor looked at him. This is the tragedy, Mr. Morneau. That morality has long ceased to have legal weight. These words hung in the air, and even the judge was in no hurry to interrupt them. Because even though she represented the law, she understood that a mother's heart is not subject to the articles of the code. Chapter 4. Love Against the Past. Natalie sat on the witness stand, but her thoughts were far outside the courtroom. She saw herself as the girl who makes coffee for Alex in the morning before work. She recalled how the two of them would stay in a university lab until late at night, arguing over some scientific question, then laughing in the car in the rain. All this was until that night. Judge Kelly Raines turned to her. Mrs. Johnson, it's your turn now. Please express your position. Natalie stood up. Her voice did not tremble, but it sounded like someone who had repeatedly said these words aloud in front of a mirror. I am not blind to what happened. I know who Alex was then, and I know who he is now. We are all not just our actions, we are our choices after a mistake. Maybe I would never have forgiven if I hadn't seen him change. Slowly, step by step. No pathos, no excuses, simply by working on yourself. Eleanor just sighed quietly at that moment, as if she had heard this speech more than once. He is not asking you to love him. He asks for the right to be a part of my life, our life, and I want my home to be where he is. Yes, we made a mistake in the past, but now I choose him again, consciously. The judge slightly bowed her head, looking at Natalia. Do you understand that even with the mutual consent of your marriage, without the consent of the co-owner of the apartment, Alex does not have the right to live? I understand, answered Natalie calmly. But I believe that in a world where a recidivist or a bankrupt is given a second chance, we have the right to give a second chance to a person who has been through hell and returned from it not empty. For a few seconds, there was silence in the hall. Alex looked at Natalie like a person who has found the ground under his feet after a long drift in the dark. The judge looked at the notes. There was neither approval nor condemnation in her face, only the calm concentration of someone who knows sometimes the truth is not found in facts, it is sought in hearts. The court takes a break for 15 minutes. After that, the parties have their closing arguments, Kelly said as she struck the gavel. Alex and Natalie remained sitting next to each other. He did not touch her hand, but there was no longer a shadow between them. Chapter 5, Court Collision. When Judge Kelly Raines returned to the courtroom after recess, she no longer looked at the parties, only at the documents in front of her. Her gestures became even more restrained, her voice even almost mathematically precise. Johnson v. Woods is about the right to move into a condominium, she began. The disputed property is owned in equal shares by Mrs. Natalie Johnson and Mrs. Elena Woods. Plaintiff Alex Johnson, not having ownership rights to the apartment, requests permission to live in his wife's home. The clerk of the court carefully followed every word, taking notes. The hall became so quiet that one of the audience in the back row could be heard taking a phone out of his pocket. The law of the state of Washington clearly defines, in the case of partial ownership of a residential premises, any occupancy of third parties must take place with the consent of all co-owners. The lack of such consent is grounds for refusing to grant such a claim, the judge continued. Miss Woods, as a co-owner, stated in writing her disapproval of Mr. Johnson's occupancy. Elena, clasping her hands in her lap, did not raise her eyes. Natalie sat motionless, a face that didn't look like one of defeat or acceptance, but rather one of concentration before another battle. Alex looked at the judge not with hope, but with readiness. He knew that law and justice do not always go hand in hand. Considering what has been said, concluded Kelly Raines, the court makes a decision to deny the suit for occupancy. A dull thump of the gavel announced the end of the hearing, but not the end of the story. The judge looked up and added in a less official tone. However, I remind the parties that the plaintiff has the right to dispose of his share of the living space if such is issued. The law allows the sale, gift, or transfer of the right of use, and if Mr. Johnson becomes a co-owner, he will have a legal right of occupancy if he has his share. This will no longer be a matter for the court. It will be a matter of choice. She got up and went to the judge's room. Alex remained seated. Natalie is nearby. Elena got up and went out first. There was a silence in the air, not of defeat, but of reassessment. The law has its say. Now the word was for hearts. Chapter 6, Divided Blood. As the courtroom door closed behind Alex, the world became loud again. On the street, a stream of cars, snippets of conversations, clicking heels, smells of coffee from coffee shops that were already preparing for lunch. But there was still silence in him. The same one that began on the day of the tragedy and settled in it for a long time. "Are you okay?" Natalie asked, putting her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was light, but it pulsated with anxiety. "The law is not on our side," he answered briefly. "But this is not the end." They moved towards the parking lot. Alex walked in silence until he stopped in front of her car. "I will submit an application for the purchase of a share of the apartment. If you give me your share, even temporarily, I will be able to move in legally." Natalie lowered her eyes. "You know that this will destroy our relationship with my mother for good. She has already made her choice. I'm not telling her to get revenge. I just want to live with you. Not somewhere in a motel, not secretly, and as a man next to his wife." That same evening, Natalie gathered her spirits. They returned to the apartment only for a few minutes to collect the documents. Elena met them in the living room like a guard at the gates of a fortress. "You both lost, and now you want to go back through the black entrance." Her voice sounded calm, but the words stung like a blade. "We didn't lose, Mom," Natalie answered firmly. "We are looking for a way out." "Entrance? You call betraying your father's memory a way out? He would never allow his apartment to be shared with someone who has such a burden on his shoulders." Alex held her gaze. "I don't want war, Mrs. Woods, but I will not back down, because your vision of justice cannot determine my right to life." Elena looked at her daughter. There is pain in her eyes, deep, quiet, petrified. If you do, Natalie, she paused, don't come back. I will not expel you. You yourself choose who your blood belongs to. Natalie stood motionless. Only her fingers trembled slightly in Alex's palm. She already knew the answer, but saying it out loud meant burning a bridge. I don't choose between you, Mother. I choose myself. And this time, when they left, the door closed behind them with a dull, final sound. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazy